The old soldier's hands trembled not from age, but from pure rage. He thrust a crumpled paper at the president, his voice thick with emotion cutting through the calm afternoon air. "You're destroying everything we fought for." The Florida sun was beginning its slow, golden descent, casting long shadows from the palm trees that lined the pristine golf course. It was a peaceful scene, the kind of quiet President Donald J. Trump often sought amid the relentless demands of the White House. He was seated in a golf cart, studying the gentle slope of the green ahead, when a voice firm and heavy with grievance broke the silence. "Mr. President." Trump looked over. Standing just off the cart path was an older black man, his shoulders set with rigid determination. On his head was a navy blue and gold cap that read Vietnam War in bold letters. His eyes, though weary, burned with a righteous fire. The raw emotion in the man's face made the Secret Service agents tense up. But Trump, with a simple, almost casual wave of his hand, signaled for them to stand down. "It's all right," he said calmly, turning his full attention to the veteran. "Can I help you, sir?" The man's name was Samuel Jones. For 40 years he had lived in the same working-class neighborhood, just a few towns over. He had served his country, raised a family, and poured his soul into his local community center, place he saw as a foundation for the next generation. Now, he believed the president was trying to tear it all down. "You can help by explaining this," Samuel said, stepping forward and holding out a piece of paper. It was wrinkled and worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded dozens of times in anxious hands. It was a petition filled with signatures from his neighbors. "You signed that executive order a few weeks back, the one cutting the grants. Did it? You know you are gutting our community. Our kids. The Lincoln Center is losing its federal funding because of you. That place is all some of these kids have." President Trump looked from the veteran's impassioned face down to the crumpled petition. He wore a red MAGA hat and a white polo shirt, his sunglasses tucked into the collar. His expression, usually animated for the cameras, had shifted into one of quiet, intense focus. He didn't dismiss Samuel. He didn't hand the matter off to an aide. Instead, he did something that surprised him. He patted the empty seat beside him in the golf cart. "Sit down," Trump said, not as a command, but as an invitation. "Let me see that." Hesitantly, Samuel Jones sat. He watched as the president took the petition, his large hands carefully smoothing out the creases. For a long moment, the only sounds were the rustling of paper and the distant chirping of birds. Trump read every word, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, he didn't look angry, he looked thoughtful. He folded the paper neatly and handed it back to Samuel. "Samuel, is that your name on the cap?" "It's Jones," Trump asked gently. "Samuel Jones," the veteran replied, his tone still guarded. Trump turned to face him fully. "Samuel, tell me, what did they tell you this executive order was about? The people who gave you this petition, what did they say?" Samuel took a breath, anger simmering beneath the surface. "They said it was a blanket cut, that you were targeting programs in poor neighborhoods to pay for military parades and tax cuts for your friends. They said you signed a piece of paper in Washington without a single thought about who it would hurt her. After-school programs, tutoring, youth sports. All of it is on the chopping block because of you." Trump listened quietly, nodding, his eyes fixed on Samuel with calm patience. "They told you it was about taking money from kids, didn't they?" he said, not as a question, but a fact. "They told you we were shutting down a place that keeps children off the street." "Yes," Samuel said, his voice rising. "And they were right. We're already getting notices. The funding is being pulled." Trump nodded again. "The funding is being pulled," he repeated. "But they didn't tell you why. They didn't tell you the truth, Samuel." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "A few months ago, we received a report about how certain organizations were misusing federal grant money, taxpayer money, Your money. And what they were doing with it wasn't tutoring or basketball. Samuel frowned, confused. What agenda? We teach kids to read. We help them with homework. On the surface, yes, Trump continued. But do you know who took over curriculum development at the Lincoln Center last year? A group called the Future Forward Initiative. Samuel's eyes flickered with a hint of recognition. He remembered the new pamphlets, the unfamiliar slogans, the new youth counselors who spoke in rehearsed buzzwords. They use names like that to sound harmless, Trump said quietly. The president noticed the shift in Samuel's expression and spoke calmly. Samuel, that group was using federal funds to teach 6- and 7-year-old children that our country is an evil place. They were distributing materials claiming the American flag as a symbol of oppression. They held so-called workshops where children were separated by race and taught to feel guilt or resentment based on the color of their skin. He paused, letting the weight of the word settle. They weren't teaching unity, they were teaching division. They were using your tax dollars to raise a generation that hates its own country and distrusts one another. They were attacking everything you fought for in Vietnam, the ideal of one nation, indivisible, poisoning it at the root. The air in the golf cart grew thick with a different kind of tension as Samuel's anger began to curdle into a heavy, sick feeling of doubt. He recalled a conversation he had overheard weeks ago, where a young counselor told a group of kids that the founding fathers were no different from the world's worst villains. At the time, he brushed it off as youthful exaggeration. Now, it felt darker, intentional. He remembered the activist who'd organized the petition, a smooth-talking man who had expertly fueled his fears and framed the issue as a heartless president hurting a poor community. I didn't know, Samuel whispered, the crumpled petition now feeling unbearably heavy in his lap. Of course, Trump's voice softened with empathy. They don't want you to know, Samuel. They count on good people, like you people, who care deeply about their community, to be their shield. They wrap their radical politics in the language of compassion. They use your good heart against you. He pointed back toward the fairway. Look, Samuel, building something, whether it's a business or a country, is hard. It takes work. It takes unity. It takes pride. You know that better than anyone. You fought for it. But what these groups do is the opposite. They don't build. They only know how to tear things down. And I will not let them do it with taxpayer money. Not on my watch. A wave of clarity washed over Samuel Jones. The anger that had propelled him there, the righteous fire in his gut, wasn't gone. It had simply found a new and truer target. He had been a pawn, and his love for his community had been twisted, weaponized in a political game he never consented to play. He hadn't even realized he was part of a game being played. As Samuel looked at the president, the red MAGA hat, the confident demeanor, the very image the news had taught him to resent, something shifted. He no longer saw a villain. He saw a man who hadn't dismissed him or deflected his anger, but who had respected him enough to sit down and speak the unvarnished truth. Samuel's shoulders, once rigid with rage, slumped under the weight of realization. He looked down at his weathered hands, the bracelets on his wrist clinking softly in the quiet. He had come for a fight, prepared to stand as an enemy, but instead, he had found an ally. Mr. President, Samuel said, his voice low and filled with regret, I was wrong. They used me. They used all of us. President Trump placed a steady hand on the veteran's shoulder, a firm and reassuring gesture. There was no gloating in his expression, no trace of I told you so, only understanding. They use good people. Samuel, vets their strategy, Trump said gently, but they can only win if the truth stays hidden. The important thing is, you see it now. You're a patriot. You always were. For another long moment, they sat in silence as the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky with soft golds and burning orange. The conflict had ended, not with anger, not with politics, but with a direct, human conversation. When Samuel Jones left the golf course that day. The crumpled petition was still in his hand, but it no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a lesson.